celebration, commemoration.
This September in Home Store and More. All stools and chairs, all metal bins, and all DIY painting accessories are half price. But better hurry, because when all the half price stools and chairs are gone, they're gone. And when all the half price metal bins are gone, they're gone too. And as for all the half price DIY painting accessories, when they're gone, they're definitely gone. All offers available online at homestoreandmore.ie, as well as in-store at Home Store and More. Home Store and More is now open in the Portlaoise Retail Park, Timahoe Road. Home Store and More. Believe what we say. More savings every day.
This sounds silly, especially to someone that's there all the time, but it's nice to see you. I mean, it's nice to see you again.
See yourself in the mirror, not your psoriasis. Dovanex Psoriasis Ointment can help you see a difference in your psoriasis in as early as 2 weeks, and it's now available direct from the pharmacist. So at the first sign of a flare-up, try Dovanex Psoriasis Ointment and love your skin again. Contains calcipotriol for mild to moderate plaque psoriasis diagnosed by a doctor. Always read the label.
RTE Radio 1's Rising Time and Voltarol, helping walkers celebrate the joy of movement. Listen in for great walking tips and prizes. Why let pain stand in your way? Voltarol Extra Strength Gel, effective relief from joint pain all day long. Voltarol Immune Gel, extra strength 2% weight by weight gel, contains diclofenac diethylammonium. Always read the label.
At KBC, we're proud to announce that we've been voted the Best Mortgage Lender and Best Mortgage Products 2016 by the Association of Expert Mortgage Advisors. So although it might have taken you ages to find your perfect home, your search for an award-winning mortgage is already over. Call 1-800-51-52-53, drop into your local hub, click kbc.ie, or talk to a financial advisor to find out more. Mortgages from KBC, the bank of you. Lending criteria, underwriting, terms and conditions apply. Security and insurance required. Best Lender and Best Product Suite awarded in May 2016. KBC Bank Ireland plc is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
After the news on RTE Radio 1 on FM, we'll be joining Marion Finucane and her guests. It's 11:11.
RTE News on Radio 1 with Susan Jackson. Good morning. A pay deal has been agreed by the Department of Justice and the Garda Representative Association following months of negotiations. The deal could see the threat of industrial action by the union averted. A spokesperson for the Department of Justice has confirmed that agreement was reached with union representatives late on Friday night. The GRA said a positional document from these discussions will now be presented to the Central Executive Committee tomorrow for their consideration, and a decision will be made as to whether or not to put the proposals to members. A former Fianna Fáil minister has said he was told his cousin was a sex abuser in 2002, but he didn't report the matter to the Gardaí. Bill Keneally preyed on young teenage boys in and around Waterford City and used sport and basketball to groom them before carrying out abuse. The mother of one victim says former TD Brendan Keneally, a cousin of the paedophile, was told in 2002 that her son was being abused. The former TD says that contrary to what people might think, he wasn't aware that his cousin was abusing in the 1970s, 80s or 90s. The first time he said he became aware of it was in early 2002. When someone close to a victim told him, and that he was shocked by it. When asked did he talk to the Gardaí, Brendan Keneally says he didn't, as the victim said he didn't want to go further with it. The United Nations Security Council is holding an urgent meeting later today to discuss the escalating military campaign in Syria's second city, Aleppo. Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has suggested that Russia could be guilty of a war crime if it deliberately attacked an aid convoy in Syria last Monday. Meanwhile, the UN humanitarian chief Jan Egeland has called for an end to the relentless bombardment of rebel-held parts of Aleppo.
They have to stop this bombing of civilians. There has to be a cessation of hostilities again, and here we need US and Russian leadership. Russia is bombing apparently with the Syrian government. We need a cessation of hostilities for the sake of the civilians.
RTE Radio 1 weather with Aer Lingus. With Wi-Fi, blockbuster movies and award-winning service on board for great value transatlantic flights, Smart Flies Aer Lingus.
bright and quite breezy today with sunny spells and fairly widespread showers. Some will be heavy, especially in western and northern areas where some hail and thunder is likely at times. But the showers will become more isolated this evening. Cool and fresh with highest temperatures of 13 to 15 degrees. And that's all from the newsroom for the moment.
The Marion Finucane Show on RTE Radio 1 with Ireland's savings specialists. Rabodirect, the straight-talking savings bank.
Hello there, and a very good morning to you. And you're very welcome indeed to the programme this morning. I don't know what it's like out there now, but it was a beautiful morning when I was coming in. Anyway, moving on, we'll start with the Sunday Independent. Noonan, my health is fine. Apparently, Finance Minister has reassured the Cabinet and his colleagues that all are well. Minister moves to reassure Cabinet ahead of the budget. And rising Fine Gael star O'Connell calls for party clear-out. Now, over Central Bank digs in against changes to mortgage rules. It'll be interesting to see how that develops, as politicians, I presume, will try and find ways to get around it. Anyway, the Sunday Times, Halligan will pressure Ross on bus dispute. You'd like to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, I would think. And Mullen's horse in suspicious betting probe, and that is the headline that the British horse racing authority is investigating the withdrawal of fine, and apparently this is to do with betting and unusual betting, and it goes way down in the body of the copy. It says Mullins, who is not suspected of any wrongdoing because he has previously spoken out against doping and cheating and so on and so forth. Now, the Sunday Business Post, small USC tax cuts as Noonan prepares pro-business budget. USC to drop by 0.5% for lower paid workers and further crackdown on corporate tax avoidance. Hospitals in crisis, key targets missed despite 500 million funding boost. I look forward to the weekends where I will not be reading out those headlines. And who was writing about it? Jean Kerrigan was writing about it today, that when Mary Harney was Minister for Health and she declared, as it were, an emergency about hospital beds and waiting and all that, that was 10 years ago, and it still goes on and on and on. Now, the Irish Mail on Sunday, you thought rents were expensive in Dublin, did you? The headline says 46,000 a month is the astonishing amount we pay to rent an apartment for our ambassador in Tokyo. I hope it's a very nice apartment. The Irish Sun on Sunday, Hutch death chase on CCTV. My hell as a Hutch, and I'm sure that's the headline for the Sunday World, and I'm sure it's not pleasant to be a Hutch at the moment and thinking that there's somebody out to kill you just because of your associations with it. Anyway, let me go and introduce our guest to you this morning. We've been joined by Professor Alan Barrett, Director of the ESRI, Noreen Hegarty, Operations Director of Ireland's Lonely Planet. No, Operations Director Ireland of the Lonely Planet, Tom Burke, Director of Retail Ireland, Jackie Lavin, businesswoman, and Owen Reedy, SIP2 Divisional Organiser. And you're all very welcome indeed. Now, oddly enough, there's not that much on the front of the papers, but there is quite a bit on the inside about the bus dispute and the effect it's having on retail, and we saw the pictures on the telly last night, and it all looked pretty bleak. Tom Burke, Director of Retail Ireland, what kind of impact is it having on retail?
Morning, Marion. Yeah, it's having a very, very significant impact on retail. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I've been speaking to retailers in recent days, and yesterday also, and up to 60% in some cases of a sales loss in the day. So hugely impactful. As you said, you will have seen the pictures of desolate looking streets in the city centre yesterday, very, very quiet. Now the weather will have had an impact as well, but there can be no doubt that it's having a massive impact. I guess the real concern from our perspective is that, this is a dispute not of our making as an industry. It's a third party dispute that's having a massive impact upon our sector, which is only starting to recover after a number of extremely difficult years. And when you take that in context, I guess there's real frustration within the industry that nothing can be done, or it appears there's nothing can be done to stop the impact that it's having. I spoke to one retailer yesterday who closed a couple of his stores early and actually sent his staff home, and in some cases sent them to other stores. That's unheard of in the city centre from a retail perspective. It just doesn't happen, particularly on a Saturday, and it's really, really disappointing and very worrying in terms of the long-term viability of the sector.
Yeah. Owen?
Tom's spot on. I think he makes a very good, clever argument as to how important public transport is. I mean, if we don't properly fund the likes of Dublin Bus and Irish Rail and Bus Éireann, cities will effectively, be stagnant. It's important for society. It's important for a functioning economic activity in the city. So, we're under no illusions. We're not surprised by any of this. We don't take any of the action that we've been involved in lightly. But here's the rub. There are three parties to this. The workers are one party. There's a minister who's a shareholder who has sat in his hands and talked about not being a sugar daddy and nonsense like that. And there's an employer who's saying all they'll do is go back to the WRC to talk about a Labour Court recommendation of the staff rejected.
Isn't that what our procedures are?
No, I think, Marion, we've had 6 days now with potential another 13. Our procedures can avoid all this if people are prepared to cop on and compromise. We are. We'll go into talks immediately as long as the employer is prepared to say, we accept that the Labour Court recommendation is not the only show in town. We need a little bit of creative thinking here. And the real story here, and it's in a number of the papers to varying degrees, the real story here is the chronic underfunding of public transport. There's this argument that, these state companies, they get a handout or a leg up.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. Right across Europe, to fund public transport, all companies, whether they're private or public, receive significant state subvention. In Ireland, we receive one of the lowest. The three CIE companies have had their subsidies cut by over a third in the last decade. So, there's a bigger issue here. We're sleepwalking ourselves into a crisis in Bus Éireann and in Irish Rail before the year's out if we don't grasp the nettle now.
I suppose even reading the coverage in the paper, I think the one thing everybody agrees on is that ultimately a solution will be arrived at. The papers are actually kind of interesting because there's a blend of takes on it. So for example, Sarah Carey, writing in the Irish Independent, is actually quite sympathetic to the bus workers, and she's putting it in terms of, I think the headline is something along the lines of, well, look, this is what protest looks like.
Yes.
And of course the great mystery during the austerity years was how little protesting there was.
Yeah.
And she's sort of saying, and I think an awful lot of people again have sympathy for this argument that the bus workers have experienced pay cuts, all
8 years.
Yeah, all those sort of things. So I think there is sympathy out there to a degree. But I don't think that sympathy is going to last for very, very long. And I think, again, as we go into winter, there's more and more strikes. This is going to get, more and more difficult for people. I think, I don't want this to be confrontational or anything, but just to pick up one piece, when a union representative says, oh, this is all about investing in the service, I don't imbibe that entirely, in the sense that if you get more money and more money goes in to pay your members, now, make the argument that your members deserve more money. That's absolutely fine. But to dress this up in some shape or other that this is about investment in a public service, there might be a broader issue there, but I think we're talking about what may be a very defensible argument that your members are entitled to more money. But I think it is important that we just lock in on that. The other theme, of course, though, that comes up in the papers, and this is where people might start losing a little bit of sympathy, is you could only have a strike like this in a public sector setting. Most private sector workers would look on at this and sort of say, the notion that you would sort of say you were going off for 13 days. And it's not, again, just the workers here are the problem. Management in a private sector setting wouldn't allow the situation to arise that, that you'd be in this sort of a zone. So I think there is a huge onus on the two sides. I've no doubt that there is, right on both sides.
Three.
Well, on the tree, just to talk briefly about that, personally I do believe that one of the worst things the Minister could do would be to intervene at this stage. And it isn't solely about this particular dispute. if a minister sends a signal that, you know, the state checkbook is there, what it does is it completely takes the incentive away from management and unions to hammer out a deal. Okay, if there's as much as a signal out there that somebody else is going to come in and solve the problem, you completely take the incentive away. And I mean, one of the reasons for running companies like this, while they're state-owned, to run them at a distance, is you want to make sure that all the parties involved have an incentive to make sure that the entity is run as efficiently as possible.
Noreen? I think that many people looking at it just become exasperated by the choreography of it all. That, you know, you have the like we did with the Lewis strikes, you have, you know, a lot of days that are going to disrupt and disproportionately affect people who are students, people who are elderly, people who are in low-paid jobs who can't afford any other transport, and then we have the late-night talks, and it goes on for an interminable period. And I wonder if there is a better way. I mean, I think everybody agrees that we've got to be competitive, and everybody agrees it's got to be fair. But I was just looking at publicpolicy.ie, and they had some very interesting statistics on it. As Owen was saying, there hasn't been a pay increase, but there hasn't been a pay cut for the bus drivers either. The subvention in Ireland, in Dublin, is the lowest, one of the lowest of European cities. But at the same time, bus drivers in Dublin are the third highest paid in Europe. That said, we have the fifth highest cost of living in Europe. And Irish workers are 36% more productive than other workers in Europe. Now, surely in this era of technology, there must be some algorithm that you can feed all these statistics into and come up with something that is equitable for everybody, and take the personalities out of it, take the egos out of it, take the minister out of it, and actually have a timely solution, because 13 more days and facing into the effect it's going to have on businesses, on retail, and on individuals and on people, just seems terribly unfair.
Yeah, and on kids getting to school and all that. Jackie?
Well, the idea that bus drivers haven't had a pay rise in the last 8 years. Well, who has had a pay rise in the last 8 years? Nobody has had a pay rise in the last 8 years, so they're not unique in that. The fact that a small minority in an essential service can hold the capital city of the country to ransom is totally unacceptable, in my view. In a strike situation, nobody wins. The company loses money, the bus drivers lose money, all the businesses that are affected lose money. Nobody wins. And why does it have to come to this? You have a Labour Court recommendation of the 8 point whatever it is. What is the Labour Court there for if it doesn't have teeth? So I think one thing that the minister could do, or that the government could do, is give the Labour Court teeth, in the sense that it's not just an innate object there that sort of you go to but you ignore everything, all their recommendations. What's the point of having it in that case? So there must be some way of working this out without the extreme of strike. Strike to me is a withdrawal of labour, and as far as I'm concerned, the withdrawal of labour, if you don't like the terms of your contract, by all means withdraw your labour, but get the hell out of the company. Don't hold the rest of people to ransom because you don't agree with your contract of employment.
I think to be fair to the guys around the table, they've made points that are representative of points that many people make, and dealing with them one by one. Alan talks about, if we're looking for a pay increase, don't dress this up in the subvention argument. The two are inextricably interlinked. A bus company that has a public contract receives its money in two ways: state subvention and fair revenue. Now, the hard-pressed commuter has been hit in the last 5 years by about a 25% increase in fair revenue. So Dublin Bus have to get their money from somewhere. It is an undeniable fact, and Noreen has outlined it, that Dublin Bus is one of the grossly underfunded public sector transport companies in Europe.
But she also said
that
the wages are pretty good. Well, actually, I thought Stephen Kinsella's article was kind of interesting and odd, because it said that Dublin Bus couldn't reduce the fees or the fares.
No, Dublin Bus have because it's the National Transport Authority doing the fares. Dublin Bus, they can't pick and choose what the fares should be, and it's not like an airline where you might pay €400 for one seat and €5 for the other seat. So, and Stephen Kinsella's article is interesting, but it misses the point. He's basically saying Dublin householders cannot pay any more. The commuters shouldn't pay any more. But public transport, no different to health, education, it should be funded from general taxation. What is undeniable is...
then that is more money.
Well, it's more money, but it's more money
from the taxpayer.
Yeah, but the problem is this, Marion. We live in a society, it seems, where the economic narrative seems to be make the user pay more, okay, as opposed to the general taxation argument. Noreen made a very interesting point there about there should be some kind of a process. And quite frankly, we don't like the late nights either. I'm fed up with the choreography too. I'd rather have a more sane existence. And to take the egos out of it, I'd be well for that. But here's the thing. We had something previously before which was much derided by many, and I'm not advocating we go back to it, by the way, but we had a process in the public service. The bus companies are not part of the public service, they're commercial. We had benchmarking where people came together and looked at the worth of a particular job. Now, in the absence of those type of mechanisms, who is to decide what a bus worker should earn? The way it works is they organise themselves in trade unions, they sit down with their employer and they try and hammer out a deal. And that's where we're at now.
One of the things that gets little comment is the quality of management. You know, if you take the public versus private and all of that, for years you couldn't get a bus from the airport in Dublin into town when it was just CIE as it was then. Then Aircoach came on and suddenly the management says, oh my goodness, there are people out at the airport who might have to come in. Like, it seems to me that the management, I don't get a sense of energy from them. Any takers on that?
Well, it links into the point that I was making there, right, that you want to make sure the minister doesn't come in. Because if the minister comes in, it again weakens the incentive of the management to deal with this in a constructive way. But your question sort of meanders into a whole new area, which again is the notion of whether or not there should be more privatised bus routes. I don't think there's a huge clamouring for this at the moment, but I have little doubt that as the strike carries on, people are going to start asking the question, well, isn't it a bit annoying that I actually can't just take my custom to another bus company who are willing to take me and, you know, where drivers are willing to drive? So I think there is...
Look at Britain. Look at Britain, where they have privatised the bus services and the rate of subvention is much higher. And actually the bus drivers earn a lower salary. Privatising the bus services, you'll either have two scenarios. You either take routes off Dublin Bus and give them to someone else. You still have to subvent it. Across Europe, it's clear. Public or private, you still have to subvent it. The other alternative is you have 4 or 5 bus companies racing around the city, like in the bin industry, trying to pick people up. That's not the way to go. The way to go, and we don't want the minister, I have no interest in the minister opening up his checkbook. What I want the minister to do is to say, we have had chronic underfunding of public transport over my lifetime as minister.
That means give me the money.
No, it doesn't mean give me the money.
I think the experience
fund the bus companies properly.
The experience of other transport sectors might maybe dissuade that argument. In the sense we look at the airline industry is probably a good example in terms of what's happened when they took the control off airlines. No, and look, that's fine. But in terms of the rights and wrongs and privatised or not privatised, we need to be very real and very clear about this. We have a very serious situation that's developing in Dublin City at the moment. We have small, medium-sized, and even large businesses that are in real trouble as a result of what's happened. And as you know, as outlined there, we're talking about 13 more days of this. Yeah. These businesses cannot take that. They cannot absorb that. We also need to understand there's reputational risk here as well. We have major international retail chains that are now starting to look at Dublin and say, well, maybe I won't invest in Dublin going forward if this is the sort of situation I can expect when I have a day where sales are down 60%.
And whose fault is all that, Tom?
But I'm not here. I'm absolutely not. I'm not here to apportion blame. I'm here to say something needs to be done for the businesses in Dublin who have no party to this dispute whatsoever, none whatsoever, but are taking and bearing the brunt of it.
And to be fair about it, and if you look at, we talked about the UK there, the subvention in London is 39%, the subvention in Dublin is 29%. London is a city that has a fantastic tube network as well as a bus network. Yeah. So, you know,
and the fares are very expensive in Dublin.
I think they're capped at £6.80 or something like that a day, on your Oyster card. But I think you've got to look at it in an overall context and be fair about it. Look at the salaries. You mentioned benchmarking there. I mean, I can only speak for my business. We rank gold salaries around the world. It says that we're trying to be fair. We take into account the cost of living in the environment that you're in, what the salary is in other locations where the company is based, and then we work out what is an equitable salary on that basis. And I think that's what's lacking in all of this. We've got to stay competitive because that's where we're at risk in terms of another global recession. If we're not competitive, the same things are going to happen again.
Owen, you're the man in the hot seat. What's your solution to the whole thing? I mean, you said there has to be compromise. What's your compromise?
Our compromise, Jackie, is going to be discussed if we ever get into the WRC. You might fire me if I don't give you the compromise here, and I can understand the temptation.
No, but you have to be fair. You
of course, I'll be fair.
And asking the government just for another checkbook to kind of,
you see, again, Jackie, we're not asking anybody for
another check. Money.
Yeah, it is.
It's about money. Somebody has to pay for it.
It's about money, and it's about making sure that the people that Tom represent can have viable businesses. You can only do that if you invest in public transport. What's the solution? The solution is certainly somewhere north of 2.75% a year. Our claim is 5% a year.
Well, is it 3%? What is it?
Well, Jackie, you come to the WRC with us if you want.
But tell us what to expect.
What we expect.
What do we need to expect?
What we expect, and I mean, this is a serious issue because 400,000 people every day are voted.
Yes.
What we expect is the employer to be allowed to sit down, negotiate and bargain. And what we expect is the Minister for Transport to start to do his job.
When you say the Minister for Transport to do his job, it's very interesting going through the papers, the amount of difference there is here of people saying stay out of it, Minister,
and a lot of people saying
get into it. Get into it.
There.
You picked out one of the articles, Noreen, which was about it was on the front page about Halligan.
Oh, about John Halligan, yeah. I mean, he's saying that he's going to put pressure on Minister Ross to get involved in it. And I just thought there was a bit of a kind of a dilemma there. John Halligan was out yesterday on the protest march about the University Hospital in Waterford and concerns about the future there. I thought Catherine Zapponi out on the Repeal the 8th march. You know, these guys are in government now. They are part of government. You can't be on both sides of the argument. You can't be protesting on the streets with the people and at the same time sitting around the cabinet table making the decisions.
Well, I seem to remember Garrett Fitzgerald engaging in protests at a certain stage.
Not really with Taoiseach.
I'm trying to remember.
I mean, I can understand protesting against wars, or I can understand, international events. But I think things that you have a power in, how can you talk out of both sides of your mouth?
No, I think Garrett got involved very deeply in the European. Remember when a couple of the referendums had been lost? He kind of came out of it. But famously, of course, Liam Cosgrave is a Taoiseach who voted against his own government.
Yeah, that's when you reflect backwards on it, was an extraordinary thing to do.
Well, it's mild. I mean, when you talk about John Halligan just making little rumps, but the notion that the Taoiseach voted against his own government is quite extraordinary. So I guess there is precedent for it.
Well, between Halligan and Ross, it's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Isn't that what that is? Really, let's do a deal between us, guys. I'll protest for you, you protest for me. Isn't that what that's all about?
Michael McDougall is writing about that actually on the back of the Business Post today, and he's talking about that. It's sort of government by paralysis.
Paralysis.
And it means nothing.
And make sure nobody makes a decision.
And there isn't leadership being shown.
Well, let's have an inquiry about an inquiry, and then by the time you get to the end of the inquiry, nobody remembers what the inquiry was about in the first place because the heat has gone out of the debate.
But can I just say, actually, sometimes paralysis can be a good thing, okay? And Ross not getting involved, okay, there's this dispute, but the bigger issue here is the renegotiation of Lansdowne Road next year. And I think the fear is, again, and it's not solely about this dispute, and I think there is a political tactic going on here, that if Ross was to get involved now, then the question is, how is Pascal Donoghue and Michael Noonan going to behave next year when you're talking about 300,000 public sector
workers?
That's the key.
So I think it's in the absence of any form of centralised pay bargaining, Alan, which many people derided, and by the way, I'm not advocating that we go back to it, but it got a really bad rep across the board. In the absence of any centralised pay bargaining, this is what happens.
I guess the concern, though, for if you're an average worker out there and you're looking at pay claims in excess of 21%, if you all in, it's a real concern, because certainly in our industry, there's we've done a recent survey in Retail Ireland, and half of our members aren't paying pay increases at the moment because they can't afford it.
We represent the average worker, and I mean, even the likes of Patricia Callan from SFA said that 60% of small businesses in her organisation, which are less than 50 employees, are paying pay increases of 2.5% a year.
2.5% a year, not 21% on.
No, we're not looking for 21%.
It's 15 on top of 6.
Well, you didn't tell Jackie what you're looking for.
Well, I've told you what we're looking for. I won't tell you what we've settled for. That is something that is to be discussed.
But there is merit in that competitiveness argument, Marion, in the sense that it's very important that we retain that competitiveness piece, because if we start to run away with ourselves at a time when the economy is just starting to pick up again, and if costs are allowed to outstrip what's coming in, and certainly from a retail perspective, we can already see that the value of sales are only recovering at half the rate of volume. So what that tells us is there's massive discounting going on in order to attract the consumer who's still extremely price sensitive. So in that context, pay increases are of the order of what's being discussed here are incredible and just not realistic. Certainly the pay increases within our sector are around 2 to 2.5%, much like Owen has mentioned. But again, it's over 18 months in a lot of cases and are completely out of line with what's being discussed.
Okay, the retail business is extremely fragile and is hugely subject to competition and underpricing and undercutting and that kind of thing. And right across the board, it's extremely fragile. It's an extremely fragile business.
Yeah. Right. Okay, well, just to say there is one very large article about, so buyer beware, which is the M&S's and the British Janes are now, they've always charged more here than they do in sterling in Britain, but even more so now, and they haven't taken into account the fact that sterling took a hit after Brexit. But anyway, let's move on to the budget to see if there'll be increases there. Small USC tax cuts as Noonan prepares pro-business budget. Tom, what do you think of that one? Business Post page 1.
Yeah, look, I think it's encouraging. I guess I'd be quite concerned that the limited scope the Minister has, certainly from his public pronouncements in recent days, it would appear that he has extremely limited scope in terms of where you can go on this. My supplementary concern, I guess, to that point would be that if that scope is as limited as being touted, that it would be spread too thinly to have any real impact. You're discussing and you're talking in the papers this morning about increases or in disposable income for the consumer of €50 in a year. That's not going to do it. In terms of what's required, there's a real squeeze middle in Ireland, and it's maybe a bit of a cliche at this stage, but they exist, they're out there, and we're, in terms of the taxation regime, there needs to be a relaxation of the taxation regime in that middle income range, because they're totally squeezed. We're entering the higher rate of tax way below the average industrial wage at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of laughable situation. It's also a discouragement to work, and it's a discouragement to investment here in Ireland as well. If you're trying to attract businesses on the back of Brexit and all the rest of it, and you're saying to them, come and work here, if you were looking at your wage packet here in Dublin versus what you could earn in London or any of the other major economies around Europe, would you take it on? I know I wouldn't. There's thousands in the difference, and we need to start making moves. I know it's not going to be done overnight, but we need to start making moves in the direction of easing that burden. I'd also be concerned that it lacks ambition. The line has always been that we need to be careful, and that's fine, but we need to build the infrastructure that sustains this country for the next 20 or 30 years, and certainly what's being proposed will not do that. We need to look at new motorways.
See,
we need to look at
that's the flip side of what you were saying to Owen, in the sense that it's all about the money and which way the government gets the money and how the government spends the money, and people want good services and they want good medical care and they want all those things, and they cost a lot of money, and that's why you have bus drivers and others to come looking for more money. So it's kind of all goes around in a circle.
Yeah, that's fine, but we're talking about the future of the country here in terms of the long-term future. We're not talking about day-to-day spending. I certainly wouldn't advocate borrowing to supplement the day-to-day budget.
But we are.
Absolutely, and we should look to reduce that. I guess the concern is that we're not maybe looking at borrowing enough in terms of the longer-term implications for the country. And again, Mr. Allen has a view on this, but the sense that we're not building infrastructure that can sustain this country over the next 30 or 40 years, where there's no ambition in it to do that, and that's what would concern me greatly.
Alan? Yeah, the coverage of the budget in the paper, it's interesting, and to use Tom's phrase, I mean, it lacks ambition, but I think there's very good reasons that it lacks ambition. I mean, the first thing to say, of course, is that the amount of money on offer here is very small. It's very limited. It's constrained by the fiscal rules. I'm not going to say fiscal space, but I can see that look of fear on your face. But basically, when you assess the amount of money that's there and you adjust it for things like, we will need more money in the hospitals, there will be a renegotiation of Lansdowne Road, so some of the money is taken away anyway. So there's very little money. You also get the sense that the political environment is such as that no risks are going to be taken here. I mean, the primary objective from a political point of view of this budget is to get it passed. So in the old days, even ministers where they had very, very little room for manoeuvre, they might have tried as a sort of an eye-catching type policy, whatever it might be. Individualisation would have been one. That wasn't sort of necessarily the big piece of the budget, but sometimes they can go horribly wrong. So I think there's not much out of economic space. There's not an awful lot of political space. To come back to again some of the other points though on investment. The notion of reducing the USE by whatever is going to €5 or €10 a week, I mean, this just doesn't certainly persuade me that it's a terribly good use of money. There's two ways of looking at it. I mean, one is it's a very small amount of money, so I'm not really sure that it's going to make significant difference to people's lives. But the other thing about it is, and this is a broader concern, one of the things we learned during the crisis was the fragility of the Irish tax base. And you remember these discussions around that our problem was that the tax base was too narrow, and when things went badly wrong, the public finances just ended up in a terrible state. The notion that we're now sort of chipping away at a very robust tax like the USC just strikes me as being a pretty crazy thing to do. And very, very strangely, I think the election showed, I'm not sure there was a huge clamouring out there. If this was such a popular idea, I think Fine Gael would have done substantially better. And I think Fine Gael politicians will even quietly say that when they knocked on doors, nobody congratulated them about the proposal about USC. There was much greater concern about investment in the health system, education, and all those sort of notions. So this might be a strange one, but I wonder for once, could a government make itself more popular by ignoring an election promise? And just sort of say, well, we made this promise, but actually, when push comes to shove, may not have been a great idea, and actually just put the million, or the billion rather, that's available into the sort of investment that we've been talking about, including public transport.
I think people have a real distrust of politicians who promise things anymore, and I think we went through all of that in the Celtic Tiger era, where it was one giveaway budget after the other. I think now that people their expectations are low, and they're more realistic, and I think they probably appreciate steady as she goes. And I think that is the approach at the moment. If you look at the polls today, nobody's taken any risks. When you look at that, nothing has really changed in terms of support since the election. Okay, Fianna Fáil are 2 down, but is it in the margin of error? Nobody's going to take any risks that they're going to do anything dramatic that's going to change that.
Well, it looks like even if there were an election, the result
would be the same. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that part of the poll in the Sunday Business Post is about the Apple ruling, and 54% of their respondents say that they want the government to appeal the Apple ruling, which gives an indication that people see that there's a necessity to kind of support business. And I know we deride it locally a lot, but actually internationally we are seen as a country where it's easy to do business. The IDA has been incredibly successful at attracting foreign direct investment. Obviously the 12.5% corporate tax rate factor in that, but other things as well. And I think we want to keep that momentum going. I suspect people understand that, they get it, and they're not expecting anything dramatic out of this budget.
Yeah, but what do you think? What could we do with 13 billion?
46% of the people, in the poll said take the money. And my instinct would be, if somebody is going to hand you money, you take it.
But it's
first.
not. No, I don't want to go back into the whole debate, Jackie, but it's not our money.
Let me finish the point. You take it first, and then you deal with whose it is afterwards. But what you have, you hold to begin with. And if you're being offered 13 or maybe 19 billion or whatever it is, okay, thank you very much, let's take it. Now, it doesn't mean it's all ours, of course it isn't, and maybe we will have to dole some of it out, but you take it first. That's the first thing you do. Now, Apple are appealing anyway.
That's right.
So let them appeal. It's their appeal.
I'm not worried about that though, Jackie. It's also about security, stability, about attracting investment. They don't like anything that's
we know all that, but they're hardly going to up sticks and leave.
No, but you know what will happen? You know what will happen? There'll be paralysis. There will be like there is in the UK at the moment, where Brexit hasn't actually hit yet, and there's just that period of people don't know what's happening, and that instability actually in itself is going backwards.
Okay, just getting back to the budget, because the reality about the Apple debate is whether the government appealed or didn't appeal, Apple would appeal. So that money, if it were to be there or not, wouldn't be there for at least a decade. And as guys have said, it mightn't even be ours. So look, just getting back to the budget, this thing where the government are saying 2/3 of the 1 billion will be spent on public spending and 1/3 on tax cutting. I agree with Alan. €5 a week for low to middle income earners isn't going to make a difference. I think in the boom, 1/3 of our tax base was on stamp duty or was reliant on construction. I mean, that's crazy. We need to move more towards European norms when it comes to employers' obligation to pay tax, and when it comes to workers and other taxes that are there as well. I think Fine Gael got their message at the electorate. That thing of abolishing the USC wasn't that popular. One thing I think that the government should do is abolish this handout, and it is a handout and a leg up to the hospitality sector. 620 million could be saved. And Jackie talked to me earlier on about, Minister Ross should force people to accept Labour Court recommendations. the very hospitality sector, the Irish Hotels Federation and the Restaurants Association of Ireland, don't think they passed it back to the consumer. And they are the very people who are avoiding going to places like the Labour Court because they won't sit down.
Well, I disagree that it wasn't handed back to the consumer.
It wasn't.
I totally disagree because I was in the business when
you can't have it.
It was actually handed back.
The point I'd make is people can't have it both ways. The hospitality sector got a leg up. The same hospitality sector that got a leg up from the state are giving the two fingers to the state when it comes to sitting down in joint labour committees and employment regulation orders
well, the whole,
to lift the wages for unpaid workers.
But they're paying the minimum wage, Owen, aren't they?
Exactly.
I mean, they are abiding by the law.
Yes, they
and
are.
I would say to you in relation to that, tourism is doing very well in Ireland. Why would we penalise something that
as a result of the leg up that they got?
Why would we do something that would in any way damage that?
Sorry, I mean, one of the reasons that they got that help was because the crash put them in great danger.
It was on the ground. The industry was on the ground.
Can I just finish the point? And even at that time, the most amazing restaurants were reducing their prices and giving special offers and all of that. They had to. But they're still getting that leg up, and the prices have gone back up.
And that's my point.
Marion, if you look at it, there's Dublin and then there's the rest of the country.
Yes.
In Dublin at the moment, the problem is there isn't enough hotel capacity because nothing was built through the recession. And actually, we're in a pretty critical situation in terms of growing the tourism industry in Dublin. You can't get a hotel bed, so you need people to invest in that. And then the rest of the country hasn't benefited the way Dublin has.
If you look
the
at
hotels around the country, the hotels, the restaurants. So it's I think we're having a blanket approach to something that's much more nuanced and much more complex.
No, it's just another Celtic Tiger lesson. But if you remember, we put in a whole load of tax incentives that were helping people. And initially they were helping them because, industry was on its knees and this was about urban regeneration or whatever like that. The problem was we seemed to forget that the tax incentive was in place way beyond it being necessary. Now, I have to say, if I go into a Dublin pub or a Dublin restaurant or a Dublin hotel on a Friday or Saturday night, this does not strike me as an industry that needs help in Dublin. And so I think the logic has to be clear. When the need for the tax incentive has gone, the tax incentive should go. And we need to be very, very brave about it. And again,
so what are we going to do? Are we going to section off the Dublin section then and charge them more and charge the country people less?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, you could think in terms of abolishing the tax break and then reallocating some of the money that is saved to investment projects of a tourism nature around the country. I mean, you could be creative. But what I'm absolutely saying is, there are a group of people getting this tax break at the moment, which is expensive, and I am not at all convinced that they need it. And let's be clear about this. Preferential tax treatment. This is the state giving money to a group of people who don't really need it. Back to the point earlier on again about how limited our room for manoeuvre is. I think you want to get those sort of things.
The farm industry all the time. They give and they have they have special incentives for the farm industry. So there is special incentives for various industries that need it at particular times.
And we need to invest. But we need to investigate all of them forensically. But having said that, I don't think the verge just like the farmers into something.
No, just the point Alan made earlier in terms of the impact Fine Gael had, I suppose, when they knocked on doors in advance of the last election. I would suggest that Fine Gael's great failing was the last time was not listening to the regional vote. And I guess maybe the point the guys are making here is around the kind of two-tier economy, which still exists, and certainly my members tell me about it in terms of the performance of their Dublin stores versus those in the regions, who still haven't seen any recovery. Okay, inside the M50 and in the major urban centres of Cork, Limerick, Galway, we've seen a recovery, but some of the regional towns still haven't seen that recovery. And in our budget submission, we suggest that the government put aside a significant proportion of money and finance and funding to a regeneration scheme of our towns. If you look around some of the towns, the big towns around the country, they've shown real scarring over the last 6 or 8 years, aesthetically, commercially, in every single way possible. We need investment there to attract consumers back into these towns, be it pubs, restaurants, or indeed stores. But we also need to make it a commercially viable space. So we need things, rent relief schemes. We need to look at. We need to be creative in terms of how we make these towns good again, because they've lost a key shopping demographic. They've lost that 18 to 30-year-old who's either gone to the major urban centre or indeed left the country. And we need to do something to make these.
Or indeed gets into their car and drives 2 or 3 miles out of town to an enormous mall. I mean, they sucked business out
of the main town. But in terms of being creative, you could be creative in terms of rates. When somebody takes over a business or a premises, let's say, that has been derelict or left there through the recession over the last 5 or 6 years or whatever, and they go and they spend the money and they do it up and they refurbish it and they make it look, lovely and clean and perfect and all of that. The rates are down their throat the minute they open the door. So they should be, if they could help by giving a moratorium on rates, like say for the first 2 years startup or something like that, because the business has already invested in the premises, and so you're being penalised for investing in the premises. The minute you open the door, even though it was derelict 5 or 6 years ago and they got nothing, they're on top of you for rates, and you've got to pay up front.
Right. Okay, couple of calls here. We employ the drivers and pay them, so why are we being targeted? Action is disproportionate. Drivers are the 6th highest paid in the world. The busmen don't have money to go out on a Friday on the wages they get. Keep up the strike. You have the support of the hard-pressed. Why not talk about how much the bus drivers earn in comparison with the general workforce? Another one, I'm in the public service, no pay rise for 8 years either. I am not on strike. Marion, we're all aware bus drivers have not had a pay increase for 8 years. On the other hand, they didn't lose jobs during the recession, unlike the thousands in the private sector. They also have a good pension scheme, whereas 45% of the workforce do not have a pension scheme, says Donald in Dublin. Be honest, anything more to Dublin Bus comes from taxation and means some other vital service is shortchanged. Marion, why when people talk about maintaining competitiveness, does no one talk about attempting to control accommodation costs, rents and purchase costs? Well, that gets a lot of coverage, it has to be said. And another one says, Marion, how does the wage of a bus driver compare with the wage of the retail workers whose jobs are under threat by these strikes, and so on, and so on, and so on? And it's time we took a break. A reminder that with us in studio this morning, Owen Reedy, Jackie Lavin, Tom Burke, Noreen Hegarty and Alan Barrett.
Podcast The Marion Finucane Show at rte.ie/radio.
Gentlemen, welcome on board. KLM Royal Dutch Airlines is pleased to announce imminent departures from Dublin.
Fly with KLM from Dublin Airport as of the 30th of October. With over 140 destinations via Amsterdam, the choice is yours. Havana, Johannesburg, Shanghai, and many more. Book your flights now at klm.com.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight.
They were looking for style, comfort, warmth. They left ready for anything. The battle for autumn and winter starts at Swords Pavilions, close to the M1. Come to our free winter fashion show at 1, 2, 3 and 4 p.m. on Saturday the 1st and Sunday the 2nd of October. 2 hours free parking. Swords Pavilions. Live by the sword.
It's time to go wild. Go out to sea. Go with the kids. Go with friends. Go sightseeing. Go see it all. Do it all. Have it all. Go all-inclusive. Book one all-inclusive cruise fare, get one half price on selected 2017 European sailings. Plus, you'll both get our best drinks package ever. Visit royalcaribbean.ie or contact your travel agent. Royal Caribbean, where extraordinary happens. Book by 8th of November. Activities not included in the price. Conditions and exclusions apply.
Topaz quality fuels can take you 3% further than standard petrol or diesel. At Topaz, we have developed a powerful in-fuel additive, scientifically proven to remove fuel combustion deposits from within your engine. Our unique additive continuously cleans and protects your engine's vital parts, meaning your engine will run smoother, cleaner and further with every journey. Topaz, we go further. All Topaz fuels are AA quality approved. 3% saving may vary depending on driving style, environmental conditions and vehicle type. See topaz.ie for details.
The Marion Finucane Show on RTE Radio 1 with Ireland's savings specialists. Rabodirect, the straight-talking savings bank.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, before we go on to other bigger kind of stories, Nora, you picked out a story about Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. There's a big interview with Bruce Springsteen in the Sunday Times today, and he talks about how bad his relationship was with his father. And in light of Jeremy Paxman's book that's coming out, and he talks about horrendous relationship with his father. And in fact, there was a Reddit thread during the week where parents were, they have these anonymous threads where you can go on and talk about your innermost secrets, and it was about
in public
parents who regretted having children. And I wonder if, not everybody's suited to having children, but I wonder if there's an element of the lousy parent produces the amazing Bruce Springsteen or Jeremy Paxman or somebody along those lines. And it's just an interesting insight into society, and I think, I wonder if we have all this talk about the millennial generation and how they, don't put down roots and have children much later, or don't decide not to have children at all. And I just wonder that whole debate in terms of society, is there a bit of a social impact going on as a result of what we've come through economically?
Yeah, the interesting thing about Jeremy Paxman is that his father disappeared and went off to Australia. And he eventually went to find him because he thought he was kind of turning into his father. And when he found his father had absolutely no interest in him. The kids, grandchildren, didn't want to know. But he did also arrive at the conclusion that actually when you cross 40, you can't be blaming your daddy anymore for whatever you are, which I thought was...
How about over 18? I would reduce that one, Marion, a bit.
But speaking as somebody whose son had an 18th birthday party last night and 60-odd teenagers from Dublin in the house, and I won't tell you what I was doing at 2 o'clock this morning, but I was cleaning. I'm not sure that I'm feeling that warm about teenagers today.
I'm not feeling that warm about the fact that you were doing the cleaning.
Yes. Well, no, in fairness, my son was as well. In fairness. But somebody's friend managed to hit every surface when she wasn't feeling so well. Put it like that.
God, I'm glad I'm not listening to this at home eating breakfast, to be perfectly honest. So I can beer.
And I'll be killed when I go home for even mentioning it. I have to say.
Right, moving on. I know it crops up every week, and none of us know the consequences of it, but it's going to hit us, and that's this British exit from the EU, and 7 bad things and 1 good thing that will hit Ireland after Brexit. Tom, that was Dan O'Brien. You had a look at that.
Yeah, a very interesting piece actually, and I guess this is something which, there was an awful lot of noise around the Brexit decision initially when the referendum result was made clear, and maybe it's died off a little bit, but I suppose businesses are only starting to get their heads around the potential impact of a Brexit over the coming years and what it will mean for them individually. So again, from a purely selfish retail perspective, there's a number of impacts, both short and longer term. In the short term, we've seen a shift in the currency, and that's obviously a major headache and reintroduces the possibility of a return to cross-border trade. Now, I have to stress we haven't seen that yet, but there is obviously that possibility that will happen. But there's also the concern around sourcing. So when you're sourcing products from the UK, what's it going to mean? Are we going to see a return of tariffs? Are we going to see a return of the hard border in the north? There's a lot of questions, a lot of unanswered questions at this stage that need to be played out over the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, a lot of people said during the campaign, oh no, it won't create a border with Northern Ireland. That is unimaginable. But in a way, if the exit happens, it is unimaginable how you can not avoid it.
Yeah. The Taoiseach went up and said we should have a united Ireland as a result of the Brexit. That's his thinking on it. There's no way you can avoid tariffs. It's just not possible.
I guess I would be encouraged though by the reaction of the government in this regard so far. They've taken this issue very seriously. They've appointed a Secretary General in the Department of the Taoiseach to look at this issue. So they clearly have this on their radar. They're clearly very serious about tackling the potential issues that may arise as a result of Brexit.
Well,
that's encouraging from my perspective.
Yeah, but apart from the financial and the business aspect, there's also the question of politics and little grounds gained could vanish.
Conor Brady has a very good piece in the Sunday Times where he says that dragging Northern Ireland out of the EU against its will is fraught with danger, and he talks about the fact that we're kind of in a phony war at the moment where there have been no real consequences of the Brexit vote, but there's a Himalayan challenge ahead of us because, if there is a border reinstated, that feeds into the extremists, and suddenly we could be in a very dodgy situation in terms of progress in Northern Ireland, let alone the economy in Northern Ireland, and it's a good piece examining that, and I think we haven't actually experienced anything as a result of Brexit. It is a phony war.
I think Noreen's spot on there in highlighting that article, because there's been a lot of talk about the economic uncertainty, but the political issue, I mean, there's potentially a constitutional problem in Northern Ireland. You know, we've spent decades trying to get the concept of consent and to get everybody in Northern Ireland to abide by it and go for it. Well, they spoke very clearly. 60-odd% voted to remain. They're only 3% of the UK population. So you have the situation where we've enshrined consent, and the constitutional issue in Northern Ireland cannot change without the majority. Yet the majority want to stay in the EU. And if Britain do ultimately exit, and I would say if, because there's a long way to go here, it has the potential to create a political crisis as well as an economic crisis. And I think devolution in Northern Ireland has been very important, very good, but it's a fragile thing. We have to be very careful with it and not take it for granted. And,
do you think there's a possibility that they might, go for another referendum?
I don't know if politically they'd be able to. I think what you're going to see though is Scotland. I mean, if I was Scottish, I would have voted against Scottish independence the last time. If I was Scottish now, I'd probably vote for Scottish independence if it meant remaining in the EU.
But that's another problem. Well, there's that, but I mean, at that time there were loads of income from the oil, but now that oil, the prices have gone down, there'd be a question of could Scotland
be viable?
Would they go to London?
Well, just a couple of reactions. I was actually at an event during the week. The Oireachtas ran an event for all members of the Oireachtas to discuss the Brexit issue, which again was a sort of an interesting. I think it's another reflection on the fact that I think official Ireland, in all fairness to it, is very plugged into this issue and really understands that there is a very important issue looming for us. I think one of the things that has developed since the referendum, one of the few things we know is the position of the cabinet now of people like Liam Fox and David Davis. So I think when the referendum was passed, there was a sense that, okay, so they're going to leave, but maybe it'll be on the soft end of the leave spectrum, whereby they may have stayed in the single market and basically the disruption might have been minimal. If you read the things that Liam Fox in particular is saying, he seems to come very much from that camp that, no, Britain can do an awful lot better, unshackled almost from Europe. So he's sending these signals that it's going to be the hard end of the exit, which means then that the sort of tariffs and everything like that we worry about could happen. Just the other thing I wanted to note, and again, the British ambassador was at this Oireachtas event that I mentioned the other day. Now, he's new in the job, and some of the questions might have been a little bit unfair. But this issue did come up again, which is, in spite of the British government and people like the Northern Ireland Secretary saying, of course there'll be no return to the border, and they're absolutely committed. Nobody in Britain has yet answered the question, how can you protect your borders while the Republic of Ireland is in an area of free movement with no border in Northern Ireland? I mean, nobody has answered that question. So there's still a great deal of uncertainty around that. And, I just think it's still worrying.
I mean, there was an article about, I think it was Paul McCarthy, that you can get on a plane in Bucharest and you can come in now. In the future, you can get on a plane in Bucharest, come into Dublin, north to the border and across, and you're there.
Fast forward 5 years where you have a situation where the farmers in the north are very disadvantaged because they're no longer in the EU, for example. The economy in the north, we talk about the economy being fragile here, it's even more fragile in Northern Ireland. There's more pressure for a border poll, and potentially are you looking at a situation where there could be a United Ireland, which would have been pretty unthinkable even a short time ago.
I don't see that.
I'm just speculating.
But no, Noreen teed it up in terms of agriculture.
Precisely, how are you going to afford it? But these are the issues that are going to arise.
But the entire Northern Ireland economy is incredibly vulnerable. And when you think about it, the Good Friday Agreement was in 1998, so we're sort of 20 years in a sort of a normalisation process. Things have normalised to a degree in Northern Ireland, but the economy hasn't. It is still a heavily public sector dominated.
It's heavily propped up.
It really is. And I think the expectation, if Brexit had not happened, was that Northern Ireland was going to move on to the next stage of sort of, post-conflict evolution, which would have involved things like foreign direct investment. It is going to be very difficult to get foreign direct investment.
It's going to be stagnated now as a result of that.
Absolutely. And that's why it's not just it's much broader. And then the question does arise, well, you could be talking 10 or 15 years, but I remember about 2 years ago, there was the first time this came into my head, where somebody brought up the notion that, bizarrely, a Brexit vote, which was something to do with British nationalism, could have led to the disintegration of the United Kingdom, partly through the Scottish route, but also through the Northern Ireland route. Because, again, if Scotland were to go, a Northern Ireland that's part of a United Kingdom without Scotland is a very strange entity.
Brendan O'Leary of the London School of Economics came up with a very interesting idea some months ago, or some weeks ago after the Brexit vote, saying we have to look at the constitutional status of Northern Ireland whilst it stays in the UK, because that's what the majority want, but that it can have some different relationship because of the vote in Northern Ireland with the EU. And he talked about various other examples whereby you had, say, Denmark on Greenland, but there was a different relationship there, the UK and Jersey. So I think it's going to require a lot of creative thinking. But the Northern Ireland situation is very fragile. It's not a long time since post-conflict, and we just have to tread very carefully.
Yeah, but I doubt it was the number one priority on the mind of the Brexiteers when they were promoting it. They didn't give two hoots about it
at all, and they see it as a shackle around their legs.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether they do or they don't, because presumably they like the status of
the Tories are very good at cutting the block grant that Northern Ireland receive. Whilst they are pro the union, they don't seem to want to pay for it.
Right. Okay, we are going to have to take another break before 12 o'clock. With us in studio this morning, Alan Barrett, Noreen Hegarty, Tom Bark, Jackie Lavin and Owen Reedy.
Podcast The Marion Finucane Show at rte.ie/radio.
Do you need comfortable shoes for your orthotics? It's time to visit Foot Solutions, where you'll find a fabulous range of stylish, comfortable shoes, including dress shoes, everyday shoes, and an extensive range of athletic footwear. Foot Solutions. Visit our stores in Dublin, Cork, Galway, Limerick, Waterford and Newbridge. Your feet will thank you for it.
3 gives us excellent coverage and has a great online portal that delivers transparent billing.
That's Anthony Murray, Group IT Manager of Dalata, Ireland's largest hotel group, who operate both Clayton and Maldron hotels. He's discussing the 3 Analyst online portal. This provides him with an easy-to-navigate way to view all communication costs, both fixed and mobile.
3 understands we're a 24/7 business, and if something needs to be dealt with quickly, it will be. We've got a great service from 3, a fantastic sense of customer loyalty, and a superb account manager.
Discover everything that 3 can do for your business at 3.ie/business. 3 works for business.
RTE Radio 1's Rising Time and Falteron want to hear about your favourite tracks and trails as we celebrate the joy of movement. Why let pain stand in your way? Falterol Extra Strength Gel, effective relief from joint pain all day long. Falterol Emule Gel Extra Strength 2% weight by weight gel contains diclofenac diethylammonium. Always read the label.
Ireland's first Mental Health and Wellbeing Summit, in partnership with Leia Healthcare, takes place October 14th at the Aviva Stadium. Learn more about mental health from the experts and personal experience speakers. It's open to everyone and includes access to speakers, workshops and exhibitions. Book now on mentalhealthandwellbeingsummit.com.
Power. We're always talking about it. We meet with power brokers for a power breakfast. We plug in the power cable. The steering of our car is power assisted. We speak of a power of good. The powers that be, the power behind the throne. So what about the power behind your pension? The power behind a Zurich pension is the sort that comes from winning best performance, best product and best pension management awards in the past 12 months. A pension powered by Zurich? Best speak to a financial broker or visit zurichlife.ie. Zurich, for those who truly love. Best investment performance and best pension product. Irish Brokers Association 2015. Pension Management Firm of the Year, Business and Finance 2016. Zurich Life Assurance PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
And now it's midday and we go to the newsroom with Susan Jackson.
Thanks, Marion, and good afternoon from the newsroom. Britain's Foreign Secretary has said that Russia could be guilty of a war crime if it was behind last Monday's attack on an aid convoy, which killed at least 20 civilians near Aleppo. The United Nations Security Council is due to meet today in New York to discuss the worsening violence in the Syrian city. The meeting was requested by the US, France and the UK. Boris Johnson accused the Russian President Vladimir Putin of protracting the conflict. Survivors of Waterford paedophile Bill Keneally are to take legal action against the state, the Gardaí and the Health Service Executive, and want a commission of inquiry established into who knew what about Keneally's abuse. Sports coach and accountant Bill Keneally was sentenced last February to 14 years in prison for abuse of young teenage boys in the 1980s in Waterford, after pleading guilty to 10 sample charges of abusing 10 boys. This week, a victim known as John has come forward, saying he told Gardaí about his abuse at the hands of Keneally in 1985, 2 years before Waterford Gardaí say they first knew. The central bank has indicated that it will not alter the mortgage deposit restrictions when the first review of the new rules are published in November. The bank's Deputy Governor, Sharon Donnery, has said it was too early to change the measures and that it would be unwise to adjust them at this stage. Ms Donnery told the Dublin Economic Workshop that the objective was to strengthen the resilience of both borrowers and the banking sector, and the rules were designed to be a permanent feature of the Irish system.
RTE Radio 1 weather with Aer Lingus. With Wi-Fi, blockbuster movies and award-winning service on board for great value transatlantic flights, Smart Flies Aer Lingus.
Bright and quite breezy today with sunny spells and fairly widespread showers. Some will be heavy, especially in western and northern areas where some hail and thunder is likely at times. But the showers will become more isolated this evening. Cool and fresh with highest temperatures of 13 to 15 degrees. And now the preview of our This Week programme on Radio 1 in an hour's time. Here's Colm Mongoin.
Concerns were raised with the TD about serial child abuser Billy Keneally 10 years before the case against him started. Gardaí weren't informed. Our South East correspondent has the details. No sugar tax to be included in the upcoming budget, but should it be included in a future one? We'll hear the cases for and against. Children's Ombudsman Niall Muldoon on his concerns about the Oberstown detention campus, and the head of Garda HR has prepared a report for the Justice Minister on the treatment of Garda whistleblower Maurice McCabe. Our reporter has more. That's all coming up on This Week here on Radio 1 at 1.
And that's all from the newsroom for the moment. Back to you, Marion.
Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Well, it's been a tumultuous run-up to tomorrow's presidential debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I was actually fantasising that I'd be watching it from behind the couch with nerves. Anyway, and my next guest is no stranger to tumultuous times in American politics, having been a speechwriter and special assistant to President George W. Bush from 2001 to 2002, during which he coined the term axis of evil. David Frum is now a senior editor at The Atlantic magazine and joins me now on the line from Canada. Tomorrow's debate, David, has been described as the most anticipated in U.S. history. What sets it apart in your view?
Well, I'll borrow a phrase that somebody used to describe one of the earlier debates, ones that Donald Trump did with multiple Republican candidates on stage. And one of the observers said, or one of the participants said, that debating with Donald Trump was like going to a NASCAR race where there are many, many cars moving at very high speeds, and one of the drivers is completely drunk. He does not observe normal norms of conduct at these events, and so that makes it very difficult for other people to anticipate what to do, what's to come. It makes for an audience that's watching often as much in shock as in edification.
Right, well, both Trump and Clinton have been laying down markers ahead of the debate in recent days. They have both separately, I hasten to add, been on The Tonight Show. And here's what they said to Jimmy Fallon about tomorrow's debate.
I never debated before the other 11 debates. I was in 11 debates, in the primary system. And I loved it. I really liked doing it, but I never debated professionally or from a political standpoint before, but I enjoyed that process. And I look forward to the next debate. And Lester is the moderator. I think it's very tough for Lester because, frankly, I thought Matt Lauer did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And they're trying to game the system by saying that Trump won the debate because Matt Lauer wasn't as tough on Trump as he was on Hillary Clinton. And that wasn't it. I mean, he was very tough on me and he was tough on her, but they're trying to make it so that Lester is going to come out and really be tough on me, and I think it's unfair. I mean, they're trying to game the system.
Speaking of pitting against each other, the debate is coming up on September 26th.
Right.
We have Lester Holt moderating. Which Trump are you going to get? Do you have any idea of what? Because he seems to be changing a bit.
Well, look, he's trying to somehow convince people to forget everything he's said and done. And I don't think that he's going to get away with that. At least, judge us on who we are, what we've done, what we've stood for. And Maya Angelou has this great line. I admired her so much. I was fortunate enough to get to know her. She said, when someone shows you who he is, believe him the first time. Right?
It is good. She is amazing.
David Frum, can you hypothesize on what the two of them are doing today? I gathered that she, anyway, is doing dummy debates.
Right. Well, that's very traditional. I imagine that Donald Trump is doing dummy debates too, that his handlers are insisting to the press that he's doing no preparation at all. I think that is just setting markers down. The way you historically practice is you find somebody who can replicate the behaviors of the opposite number. Robert Portman famously did this service for George W. Bush, and he was just excellent at it. He would, study the mannerisms of John Kerry very closely and reproduce them. And these can really, really be helpful, these preparation sessions. In 2000, George Bush was warned that Al Gore had a habit of crowding the space of the person he was talking to. Al Gore's a very big and imposing man, and George Bush is not small, but he's shorter than Al Gore and very wiry, whereas Gore was large. And in the third debate, they were sitting on a pair of stools, and Gore indeed walked over to George Bush's stool and boomed over him in a kind of dominance exercise, the kind of thing Donald Trump likes to do. And Bush was prepared and was completely unfazed, looked up from his stool, saw Gore, and nodded at him in a bemused way, and the audience instantly saw that this was an act of not only attempted but unsuccessful bullying, and those really resound badly.
It's amazing that grown people have to go through these things. Now, you've advised... Pardon?
No, it's not amazing. Look, we're primates, right? We like to imagine that we make our decisions with the thinking part of our brain, but all the important decisions of our lives, from which house to buy, who to marry, whether to get into a fight or not, they're all driven by much more primitive parts of our brain. And when we're looking for a leader of our pack, we don't make that decision in a fully rational way. One of my jokes is that the most important movie about the presidential primary process is The Godfather. It's the story about three sons, and each of them has a different attitude toward leadership and violence. And you don't want Sonny because he's going to get the pack into unnecessary fights, he's going to get you all killed.
Yeah.
You don't want Fredo because he's a weakling and a dummy. You want Michael. And the whole job of the process is to identify the pack leader who can defend the pack, keep us out of danger, but then lead us if there is danger.
And out of those two candidates, who would you think is the Michael? Michael killed a lot of people, but anyway, we'll let that pass.
No, do not let that. That's absolutely... look, political leaders, and especially presidents, are always potential war leaders. That's the part of the job. And the salience of that issue of war and peace is what makes the American presidential contest different from the contest in other democracies, because we, American voters, think about those kinds of issues, I think, more than leaders in other voters in other countries do. And Donald Trump knows this, and so he sets up what you might call little dominance exercises in each of his debates. That has been his method, and that's really the thing to watch for tomorrow night. But he will try to trigger some incident where he shows dominance over somebody else, or else he invites someone to attempt to show dominance over him, and he slaps them back. You may remember that incident with Jeb Bush, where Jeb Bush invited Donald Trump to apologize to Jeb Bush's wife for negative things that Donald Trump had said about her, implying that she had entered the country as an illegal immigrant. And Donald Trump refused, and Jeb said, hold on, okay. And that was a dominance contest that was set up by Jeb Bush, and he lost it, and it mattered.
You wanted to go in there, Noreen?
I absolutely take on board that Trump presents himself as a man who's not used to debating, but he is a man who is brilliant on TV, and he understands the TV audience better than anybody else, and we saw that through the whole process where he saw off all the other Republican contenders. I'm just wondering, David, which Donald Trump you expect us to see tomorrow night? Do you think he might moderate his position, or do you think we'll get vintage Donald Trump, the one that we're used to seeing?
I think you will see he will arrive calm, maybe even seemingly sedated, but he will be looking for his opportunity to do something humiliating to Hillary Clinton. That debating against a woman opposite number is a little tricky for him, because a lot of the ways that he tries to assert dominance are very gender coded, and they may backfire against a woman. Donald Trump made some noises that he might bring along Jennifer Flowers to the debate, one of Bill Clinton's former mistresses, and that is certainly would be and put it in the front row as a way of taunting Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure that that's going to, I mean, I don't know that he'll do it, but that kind of behavior, that's an indication of what he might do. It's also an indication of the danger he faces, because that kind of behavior does not necessarily work so well in a cross-gender debate.
He was threatening at one stage to blame Hillary for all the women in Bill Clinton's life.
Yes. Well, it's kind of an audacious, this is actually very characteristic of Trump. It's kind of an audacious move. So here is the first presidential candidate in history to have been on the cover of Playboy magazine. Here's a man with 3 marriages, a number of affairs, famously treated all of his wives very badly. One of the first wife, Ivanka, accused him in court proceedings of having raped her during their separation. His behavior with women is often just weird. He would call up one of his between marriage periods. He would call up New York Post and New York area gossip columnists, impersonate a publicist, and then tell them about all the famous women Donald Trump was going out with, whom he wasn't going out with, and it's just kind of like you would think the whole area is for him better left unaddressed, and yet because of this combination of aggression and his view that all publicity is good publicity, he is willing to go into areas where he's the one who's more at risk and challenge the other person to behave as badly as he's just behaved, and he usually gets away with the calculation that they want. So you think, okay, well, Mrs. Clinton's husband, he was not a very outstanding husband. Donald Trump's wife had a colorful career, to put it mildly, before she married him, but he's counting on Hillary Clinton not to mention that.
God, it's so dirty, isn't it? Why do you think, now you've advised Rudy Giuliani, why do you think he's supporting Trump?
They have a long-standing relationship, and New York politics really are, Manhattan's an island off the coast of America, and New York politics are really a world unto themselves, and these people from New York have internal relationships, internal debts. They also have particular dislikes. Rudy Giuliani, who's changed a lot in his time in politics, has over the way acquired a really intense dislike of Hillary Clinton, and that makes up for a lot. And indeed, just generally you see that even among a lot of the Republicans who have made their peace more or less reluctantly with Donald Trump, when you sort of press them, how did this happen? They will cite their intense dislike of Hillary Clinton. And it is that motive, much more than positive enthusiasm for Donald Trump, that explains why so many people have fallen in line in the way they have.
Jackie, why do you think they're having such a go at Hillary Clinton?
Well, I'm just wondering why it is that this outrageous behaviour, and the more outrageous he becomes, the more headlines he gets. Why are the media supporting him? And why, at what stage do you think that the American people are going to actually cotton on to this and go, this is just a publicity seeker, and we're not going to go with it. We're not going to fall into that trap. It seems to be winning up to now. It's unbelievable.
It's phenomenal.
But the world media are he's basically wiping her off the pages every single day, and in world news all around the world, the more outrageous he gets, the more publicity he gets. He'd remind you of the early days of Michael O'Leary. Here, the more outrageous he became, the more the media supported him. So, but it is a media campaign, and at the end of the day, she seems to be lacking in just that charisma, that spark. Her campaign, I don't think, has ever lit the spark that it needs to kind of counter him. She seems to be a little bit, say, political speak all the time rather than getting to the real Hillary Clinton. I think there's sort of a facade there that you very rarely actually see what's behind the mask. And I think maybe she's been in politics too long and can only speak in that tone. Whereas he just says whatever the hell comes into his whatever got into the brain, and away he goes. I've seen him on debates in America, not debates, but on interviews in America on a business level, where he just sits on the stool again. He's good at that, and everything is off the cuff. And one thing that's stuck in my mind is what he did say, that if a business opponent crosses you in any way in business, he said, you kill him, you kill his family, you kill his dog, you kill everything belonging to him. In other words, you destroy him, and you do not allow them to get back get back at you, never give them any opportunity to get back into you. And that is stuck in my brain. That's the kind of mentality the man is. He just wants to obliterate everyone. And I don't think Hillary Clinton has, and her campaign management has actually got anything, if you like, to counter that up to now. So unless she comes up with some serious spark on Monday evening, I think really he's going to be the winner.
Well, a caller was just on there to say Clinton will attack Trump with detail. How he deals with that will determine the outcome of the debate. That's from John in Limerick. Well, I think she'll destroy herself if she goes into detail, in the sense that I suspect she's a master of all the detail, but people, it's like watching paint dry if you start going
People
in.
don't want to hear that. They really don't. They want to. They vote emotionally. We were talking about that earlier on.
Yeah.
That there's an emotional attachment to who you vote for. You either like the person or you don't like the person. And for some reason, she's not likable because I think people don't see the real person. They see
but
it as
I
a
mean,
facade.
but he was so clever to get that thing about she's not likable, she's not, and then suddenly it's an acceptance.
The only thing that you hear on the news about Hillary Clinton is her illness, and that fainting, that anybody could have pneumonia. It's not a big deal.
It's not
but that's the only thing you hear about her, and you hear about her deleting the emails. That's it. You don't hear anything about her policies or anything about her experience for the job. Not really. You just.
I think Jacqueline's right. I think what's happening is that he's setting the agenda and she's responding to the agenda all the time, so she appears as if she's on the back foot. But I think we look at it from a European perspective, or perhaps from a New York perspective or a California perspective, because that's our inclination in Ireland. I think we're underestimating the sense of anti-intellectualism that there is in a lot of America, in a lot of American states. I'm just thinking back to the governor of Tennessee, for example, was in Ireland in June, and he's talking about he's got a drive to 65, which is to get 65% of the population of Tennessee to go to university by the year 2025. And I asked him what percentage you go now, and he said about 30 to 35%. Now in Ireland, we're well over 60%. So I think we're underestimating that people listen to Donald Trump. And I'm not saying, these are decent people that are just responding to him because he speaks in sound bites. They can actually repeat what he says. Whereas Hillary hasn't been able to get her message across, I think, in that clear and simple way. And the other thing I would note, having just come back from Nashville last week, is that nobody's talking about the election. In the south anyway, where I was.
Really?
They're not, people are not as politicised as we are here, and I suspect that there is a group there who will vote for Donald Trump who won't say they vote for Donald Trump. It's like the Nielsen polls, where they actually don't take the TV polls until 3 months after they sign up a new person to be a pollster, because for the first 3 months everybody pretends they watch PBS or the documentaries, and after 3 months they're back to the Kardashians. And I think that we're underestimating that in America, and I suspect that may be why Donald Trump.
I think Trump is probably one of the most outrageous narcissists to come on the political scene in recent times, it's very scary, the proposition of him being the president of the USA. But I think David hit the nail on the head, and Jackie, and we were talking about earlier on. Politicians like Trump capitalise on the emotional reaction. Build the wall, nonsense.
Yeah, lock her up.
Yeah. But it seems to appeal to people, and I think politicians, and there are cultural differences obviously between Europe and the US, but politicians need to realise that the policy wonk piece is not going to turn people on. It's emotions and values, and tragically, I think Trump's values are fairly outrageous, and it won't be a surprise that someone from a trade union background would have nothing in common with Trump. He portrays himself as the outsider. He's a multi-billionaire. He's an insider. But I think it would be wrong also to demonise everybody who will end up being a Trump supporter. I think that's to misunderstand the kind of a broken politics, and Hillary Clinton's real problem is that she's been so long around, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the trend has been in American politics for the outsider and the unexpected to do rather well. David, on that question of detail, policy, broad brush, and those kind of things, how do you see that panning out?
Well, Jimmy Carter thought that was how he would defeat Ronald Reagan in 1980, and Michael DeCox thought that was how he would defeat George H.W. Bush in 88. George H.W. Bush thought that was how he would defeat Bill Clinton in 1992, and basically it never works. I think the rule of thumb actually is the debater, and especially the presidential race, who talks about government programs more always loses. And if you use an acronym along the way, you're done for. That's not what this job interview is about. And maybe people are irrational. Maybe they assume, I think wrongly,
And you think?
Firstly, I think the discussion is incredible in the sense that it sounds like it's going to be a policy-free debate. And certainly from a European perspective, you want to know what are you going to do, whereas all the discussion, and this is no disrespect to anybody discussing it, but even reading the newspaper articles this morning, it's all about like a Super Bowl-like event, gladiators.
Yes, that was used,
So it's all about the personalities of the two individuals. Just one issue that always comes up, though, is this question of the extent to which the debates determine the actual outcome. And it's not always entirely clear that this is the case.
They reckon it was with Nixon, didn't they?
Certainly, that was always the case. But if you go forward, say, to Dukakis, I mean, the question is, was it bad debate performances? I remember the famous Willie Horton ad. Again, I don't remember or not, but there was a particular ad that it was felt did an awful lot of damage to him. I think in a lot of the debates, actually, where it matters is if a candidate is initially unfamiliar. So if you go back to Bill Clinton in 1992, although he'd been through the primaries, a lot of people, when he actually came to the presidential, were still getting to know who Bill Clinton was. And so there was a sense then that the debates mattered an awful lot, in terms of projecting him. But you get the sense that this time around, everybody knows these two people rather well. Everybody has an expectation of how things might go. And I suppose the worry I would have if I was a Hillary Clinton aide, Donald Trump can probably just go and be Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton seems to be in this constant battle to define who she is, and it's one at a personality level. But to pick up Owen's point, even when it comes to Hillary Clinton's values, for all the length of time she's been around, it is still not entirely clear as to what are her innate values. So I think she's going to be in that position again, in spite of the fact she's going to be putting out whatever particular image. And you know yourself when you're doing anything, speaking freely in any sort of, it's just much easier if you can just be yourself and speak. Yeah. If you have an agenda or you're trying to introduce it, it becomes an awful lot more difficult.
Or if you've spent a life of being careful and watching your words.
Absolutely. Whereas I can imagine, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Trump wins the debates. But I still think it's a very different thing to go to say, will he actually win the election?
Let me go to you, David. You're the man with the experience. What do you think?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It's very well said. I mean, Hillary Clinton's caution is part of why Americans don't know her. There's also, I'm sure you know the expression in Ireland that people who enter politics, some enter in order to do something and others enter in order to be something.
Yeah.
And Hillary Clinton has always had that sense of she's in politics to be something. She wants to be president. And it's up to you. You tell her what you want done, she'll get it done because she's just that capable. One more thing, in defense of the lack of policy in American debates, and maybe I'm just being chauvinistic here, but if you're running for prime minister in a parliamentary system, and you say, what I want to do is widen Route 1, and you win the election. You bring with you a parliamentary majority, and then you can widen Route 1 if you want to. Whereas a president often, the promises the president makes, the president often can't do because he or she may not get the Congress. That the parliamentary majority doesn't necessarily come with the prime minister. So you can give people indications of the directions in which you want to go, but a lot of the specific promises you make. When the most famous recent promise is George H.W. Bush's read my lips, no new taxes. And he didn't want to raise taxes, but he had a Democratic Congress, and he did want to balance the budget, and they would not give him the spending cuts he wanted without the tax increases, and he thought that was a good deal. But you're always making deals. When Hillary Clinton, the knock against Donald Trump that I think that people found most effective is not about policy. It's not about the things he wants to do. Like in policy terms, if you didn't know who this is, Donald Trump in policy is the most moderate Republican since Gerald Ford. He's secular, not religious. He's not that interested in social issues. Never talks about abortion. Pretty obviously is completely at peace with gay rights. His economy, he doesn't want to cut government spending a lot. He wants to defend social insurance. On immigration, he's closer to where this is a case where there's a unanimity among elites in favor of immigration, but he's closer to where the public is, which is much more cautious about it, much more, and that's not just true in the United States. Those positions are not unusual. What is striking about him is who he is, both his cruelty, his disdainfulness to others, and it's even more important, the fact that he's a phony, a complete phony. I mean, you quoted somebody on the panel said that he was a multi-billionaire. He's almost certainly not that. People talk about his business experience. He's a famously terrible businessman, and he's the people in the New York real estate world call him the least bankable person in real estate. He cannot borrow 50 cents for a real estate project. Nobody will lend him the money because people know his projects don't make money and he doesn't get paid back. And to the extent he's a rich man, he's rich because his father, who really was a good businessman, bought minority shares in a lot of very successful buildings as a throw of income. And because they are minority shares, Donald Trump can't mess them up. But when he does something, it's failure, almost invariably. And that is something that people don't know because, as you say, people don't. I was trying to explain to my political friends. Imagine somebody who is at 1/20th as interested in politics as you, and that's very easy to imagine. Well, they, by necessity, take 20 times as long as you to learn things about new people. So most of us in the political world, even if we're not from the New York, New Jersey area, have pretty rapidly gotten a sense of what kind of businessman Donald Trump is, what kind of human being he is. But to people who have other things to do with their lives, that information comes slower. And one of these things the debates can do is to speed up that learning process.
Right. Do you think he's going to win?
The election? Or the debate?
Both.
Well, I think after the debate, I think there'll be a lot of media chatter in his favor because the mere fact that he goes up there and doesn't throw 8 feces at the wall will impress if he behaves himself in a reasonably civilized way, people will be impressed. And I think, as you say, he will take risks and Hillary won't have taken risks in these public events. One of the things we discussed is voters judge differently from the way professional observers do. They care less about the zingers, they care more about the slow reveal of character. And I don't know that first reaction will be the public reaction, and no, I don't think it will be the election.
There you go. Well, I have to tell you, there's an awful lot of interest in this. When you talk about 1/20th of the interest in politics, there's a lot of interest in that particular political event in this part of the world. Listen, many, many thanks indeed for talking to us, David. That was David from Senior Editor at The Atlantic and former speechwriter and advisor to President George W. Bush.
Podcast The Marion Finucane Show at rte.ie/radio.
Senator windows. Those gentle summer breezes will soon turn into winter gales. Be prepared with Senator's high-quality, high-security windows. Order 5 or more Senergy Plus PVC windows and get 50% off a new back door. Order 10 or more and get the door absolutely free. Talk to your local dealer today on 1-850 774455 or visit senatorwindows.ie. Terms and conditions apply. Senator Windows, we protect your home.
In this week's Sunday Independent,
Dr. Michael Mosley, creator of the 5-2 diet, has an unmissable new guide, the health guide for the middle-aged man, with steps on how to live longer, lose weight, feel better and cut out stress. The silent killer. Plus, they've clashed in the past. Beep Horan sits down with Dr. Ciara Kelly in a very revealing interview.
and in sport, we have exclusive extracts from Jason McAteer's new book, including what really happened with Roy Keane in Saipan. The Sunday Independent, the complete read.
Come on, Charlie, go for a goal. Yes, we're through to the final. I'm such a mess, though. Mum's gonna kill me.
Well done, Charlie. Is there any mud left on the pitch? Not to worry. A quick wash with Persil capsules will sort out that gear.
Phew.
Keep on top of your game. Persil capsules, now in a bigger pack with powerful stain removal in every spin, allowing your kids to unleash their potential. Always keep away from children.
The Ray Darcy Show.
Hi Ray, my husband is living with dementia for the past 15 years. We had small children when it arrived, but oh my God, what amazing young adults our children have become. As for me, it made me the person I am.
Basically, I want people to realise it's not to be scared of, you know. It's absolutely, it's beautiful if you give it a chance.
And do you regularly give them hugs?
All the time, we're in the same bed.
Right.
It's like how water bodies be every night. I was freezing that night, oh my God, was I happy he was there.
Una, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. You are a hero. The Ray Darcy Show on RTE Radio 1 with Volkswagen. New car finance plans designed to get you on the road from Volkswagen Bank.
The Marion Finucane Show on RTE Radio 1 with Ireland's savings specialists. Rabodirect, the straight-talking savings bank.
Welcome back to the programme. Now we've had endless coverage this week of the breakup of Brangelina, but another big breakup in the news is that of
a simple show. Up to this point, a lot of shows were bad language and humiliating people. You wouldn't want your children to watch because you know what's going to happen on it and the dynamic. And I think the beauty of this show, it's brought it back to a simple idea. Everyone has a memory, I think, of cooking at some point in their life, probably baking as a young child.